This monster is destined to kill Odin, the All-Father and king of the Norse pantheon, a being so powerful that even the gods cowered before his might. So what was this creature that had Odin so worried? What kind of power did it hold that could bring an end to the whole Norse pantheon? Well, today we're going to find out in 5 minutes or less. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to look at one of the most dangerous creatures in all of Norse mythology, Fenrir the wolf. Now, if you haven't already heard about fearsome serpent, Jormungand, or the terrifying goddess Hel, then you can check those out here. But as for our story today, we'll let Snorri Sturluson pick up the tale. In the beginning, Loki sired 3 monstrous children with the giantess Angerboda, a wolf, a serpent, and a goddess of the underworld. These were Fenrir, Jormungandr, and Hel. From the moment that they were born, it was clear that these children would be trouble. Even their mother knew that her sons and daughter would grow to be so big and so powerful that she took them to the land of the giants and begged them to take her children in. But none of the giants wanted such dangerous monsters around, so they sent the kids back to Angerboda, who then went to the gods for help. However, the gods were no different than the giants and quickly agreed that something had to be done about these kids. In fact, some accounts say that the gods were actually angry at Odin for allowing such danger to come into the world. At any rate, the gods called a meeting and decided that the only option they had was to get rid of the kids. So Odin took Fenrir, Jormungand, and Hel away from their mother and set about finding a way to bind them. First, Odin took Fenrir to a place called Lit, and there he made a pair of magical chains called Gleipnir. They were made of 6 materials, 2 of which were dragon entrails and 4 were of a more mundane sort, ox leather, iron, silk, and a plant called Yrsa. Odin then used Gleipnir to tie up Fenrir, but the wolf simply tore the chains apart with ease. Odin was shocked at this and he didn't really have any other options. So he returned to the magical forge and lit it and tried again, doubling the thickness of each chain. He then tied Fenrir up and hid behind a stone to watch what would happen. But again, the wolf simply broke the chains like they were nothing. At this point, Odin was getting desperate. If he couldn't bind Fenrir, then the prophecy given by the Völuspá hinn skamma would come true. Remember how we talked about that in our last episode? Basically, Odin learns from the words of the Völva that Fenrir will grow up to kill him. This wasn't something Odin was willing to accept, so he once again went to Lith and made another set of chains, but this time he made them even thicker. He called these chains Dromi, and finally, with a little bit of help from the dwarves, he was able to bind Fenrir. But this binding came at a terrible cost. As Odin slipped the last chain through the final loop, Fenrir snarled and lunged at the god, biting clean through Tyr's hand. The pain was unbearable, and Tyr collapsed to the ground screaming. However, the second that he calmed down, Odin finished the ritual. And because of the sacrifice, Fenrir became bonded to Tyr forever. In fact, there are some accounts that claim that after this, Tyr and Fenrir became friends. But either way, the chains held, and Odin felt much better about things. So now, he just kept Fenrir chained up in Lith, and everything was fine. Right? Well, not exactly. See, those chains weren't just some normal chains. They were magical, and they had a price. Every month, Odin had to pay the dwarves who made them, or else their magic would fade and Fenrir would break free. Also, despite being bound, Fenrir continued to grow larger and larger. And as he grew, his strength also grew until he was strong enough to pull an entire mountain down on top of Lidar. At this point, Odin was pretty much done. He unfastened the chains and let Fenrir go, thinking that maybe he could keep the wolf happy. But that was definitely not the case. Fenrir immediately ran off into the forest and stayed there for 3 years. Odin, feeling terrible about what had happened to his friend Tyr, decided that he would find Fenrir and make amends. When he found the wolf, Odin offered him a deal. He would give Fenrir anything he wanted if the wolf would allow Odin to try binding him again. But this time, instead of chains, Odin wanted to use a collar. Fenrir agreed, and Odin made a collar of pure gold. Then he put it on the wolf and gave him one final warning. If Fenrir ever tried to take his life, then Odin would tear the wolf's heart out and feed it to the dogs. With that, Odin left and Fenrir went back into the forest. For a while, it seemed like Odin's plan worked. Fenrir never tried to attack him, and they even seemed to become friends. But again, the prophecy still loomed over their relationship. And as Ragnarok approached, the weight of that prophecy became impossible to ignore. As we learned in the last episode, Fenrir eventually did break free of his bonds, killing several gods in the process. And ultimately, he did turn on Odin and deliver the fatal bite that ended the All-Father's life. We know that Odin's son Vidar will avenge him by killing Fenrir, but that doesn't stop the fact that the prophecy came true. There are a few theories about why Odin allowed this to happen. Some say that Odin accepted his fate willingly, knowing that it was inevitable. After all, he did sacrifice himself in a similar way to bring Christianity to the Northmen. Others believe that Odin knew that if he didn't allow Fenrir to kill him, then the prophecy wouldn't come true. But at the same time, Fenrir would also die. So Odin chose the lesser of two evils. Either way, Odin's death was a huge blow to the gods, but it also spelled doom for humanity. See, Fenrir represented chaos, fate, and inevitability. His very existence threatened to destroy the order of the cosmos. It didn't matter how hard the gods tried or how many sacrifices they made, Fenrir was always going to be a force of destruction. That's why when he died, it didn't matter how Vidar avenged his father, the damage was already done. So, what do you think of Fearsome Wolf? How do you think Odin could have prevented the prophecy from coming true? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, if you liked this video, feel free to check out my others. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.